Hi everyone, I'm Jane, and today we're gonna paint a cute festive raccoon. Now I did this little guy on a 5x7 canvas so that you could easily convert him into a Christmas card size if you like. Also, as you may or may not be able to tell, this is our first video with my brand new camera. Now, I apologize in advance, but my old tripod was just a little too weak for my new camera, so there's a little bit of shaking in the video. Swear that will be remedied the next time we paint flat on the table. Now, before we get started, make sure you hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and then check out the video description below for a full list of materials. Now let's get started. Okay, today we are starting with a 5x7 canvas. Now look around online, there's a lot of images of raccoons that you can use to kind of get an idea of what they look like. So a raccoon's head is actually pretty simply shaped. I'm gonna decide on where I want his eyes, and I think I'm gonna place his eyes just above center here. So I'm gonna sketch out kind of an arc, because the whole shape of their head with the colors and everything kind of moves in that direction. So that's gonna be the line where his eyes are going out to the edges of his fur. Then I'm gonna find the center of his face and just loosely sketch down to about where I want his nose to be. And I think I'll put his nose right there. I'm just gonna draw a circle for now. I'll reshape it as we go along. It probably won't end up being a perfectly round nose. And we can connect the corners here with his nose. So I'm just gonna kind of sketch from there like that. And same thing on this side, about from the same place. It doesn't have to be perfectly symmetrical. We'll give him the top of his head, and you want to make sure that you leave room for all of the colors in his fur. So I ended up going a little more than an inch up, maybe about an inch and a half or so. Let's give him an ear, and their ears are pretty simply shaped. And I know my raccoon is only gonna have one ear because the other one's gonna be under a hat, but I'm gonna sketch on the other one anyway, so I know exactly where to put my hat. And let's go ahead and do the hat. You can make his hat however you want it. I'm gonna have it come off of here, just covering the edge of his ear. And the little fuzzy band of his hat. And then his little Santa hat. Give him his little puff ball there. And I'm probably gonna end up losing my puff ball as I paint him in, but that's okay. I draw it on there anyway so that I know exactly where it will go. Let's do his eyes now. Now don't make his eyes right there in the center. There's gonna be a little bit of a distance there. I'm gonna go about a half an inch out on either side. And just put them right on that line. And there, our raccoon is pretty much drawn. Let's do his little Christmas ornament that he's holding. And then everything else is gonna kind of be his body. And his hands will be in this area. But his body really, it's gonna kind of blend in with his face just a little bit. But I think that's a good place to start. So see, a raccoon's not that hard to sketch out. He's pretty simple. Let's go ahead and start painting in our background before we do anything else. Now for my background, and I'm using the heavy body paints today, but for some reason I just like to use the heavy body paints on the smaller canvases. And if you don't have heavy body and you just have basics or whatever, that's perfectly fine. You don't have to use heavy body just because that's what I'm using. And I'm using Hansa Yellow Light and Cobalt Blue, but these colors don't really matter. I just want you to pick a yellow and a blue that you know is gonna make a nice green. And these two colors don't make a bright, vibrant green. They make a very muted kind of soft green, and that's what I like. But if you wanted a more vibrant green, you could use like primary yellow and phthalo blue. I would pretty much avoid using ultramarine unless you know exactly what it's going to do, just because ultramarine can tend to not make a very nice green. And I'm going to put out a little bit of white. And I'm really just going to be using water today because the matte medium makes it a little bit hard with the heavy body paints anyway to get fine details. So I figured I would just use water and save myself the trouble. So I'm going to take my number 8 bright and I just wet it in my jar a little bit. And I'm going to loosely mix up a green color. And every time I go back for paint, it'll be a little bit different of a mixture. Sometimes more blue, sometimes more yellow, sometimes more white. Now around his hat, I am keeping my line fairly crisp. But then when I get down to where his fur is going to be, I'm really letting the ends of my brush strokes be very broken. If I have a really hard line there, I'll have a hard time covering it later. But I do want to get it in there because I don't know exactly where his fur is going to end up going just yet. So nice crisp edge around his hat. And around his fur, a much looser line. See, almost dry brushing just around that edge where his ear is going to be. And same thing right here. All right, let's get started painting in his face and stuff. So I'm going to put out some burnt umber, some unbleached titanium. You can use regular titanium if you don't have unbleached titanium, but you're going to get a different look. The unbleached titanium, it adds just a little bit more warmth and kind of neutralizes the colors a little bit more. But if you don't have the unbleached titanium, then the whites on his face are going to be very, very white. And I felt like it should have just a little bit of warmth to it. So that's why I chose the unbleached titanium. And then I'm going to put out a bit of Mars Black. But before we get started painting, I want to sketch out where the colors on his face will be. So from the bridge of his nose and just by his eye, we've kind of got our little white area that comes up like this. And it comes down toward the edge of his face. Kind of in there. And then his nose. And I'm actually going to bring that down outside of that shape just a little bit right here, but not any lower than the bottom of his nose. So it's just coming out on the side there and meets back up with his nose. And this is kind of a transition line where it goes from this brownish area to the black. So I'm just making a reminder for myself that that's where that is. Kind of where the black ends and the other brown takes over. And I'm just going to make a little line here to say that's where his arm is. Kind of his little armpit comes to his hand. Oh, and we have to give the ornament its little top. So our ornament, a little rectangle there, kind of a slightly curved line at the bottom, slightly curved line here. And now we can get busy painting him in. I'm going to go to my number 8 filbert. So the first thing I want to do is just underpaint everything. And remember that this area here is darker than, the areas up in here, which is also darker than his little eyebrow areas. So just keep that in mind. I think I'm actually going to start with the dark area. So I'm going to get some burnt umber and some black and just mix up a nice dark color. I still want it to be noticeably brown, but I want it to be very dark. So don't use just straight black. I'm not terribly worried about the shape of his eyes right now because those will be black anyway, so I'm just kind of generally leaving an area for them. I'm using almost no pressure on my brush. See how I'm getting those little broken lines? And I have quite a bit of paint here. If I push harder, I get a lot more paint. So I'm just kind of dry brushing. I'm not worried about the puff on his hat. I can add that back in later. Always soft lines on him. He's a very furry little guy. So don't put any hard lines in his hair. You know, I actually feel like I want that to be a little bit more on the black side. So I just picked up a little bit more black. There we go. The trick to painting animal fur is just layers. You know, it's lots of layers, just like we did in September. And there's not a reason to get frustrated with those layers, because if you don't like one layer, the next layer will cover it up. Let's go ahead and add some of this dark color kind of under his muzzle here. On his body. I am going to take care not to cover my ornament too much. He's going to be darker, especially right here. And then I feel like he'll get a little bit lighter as we move towards his shoulders. But I'm going to just dry brush some of this color on there. Try and keep the lines around your ornament fairly solid. Your ornament's not furry, unless it is. And then I think he's a little darker inside his ear here. And just kind of loose brush strokes there, just keeping it solid in the middle. Let's add some more brown to that mixture. Get it closer to the brown side than the black side. And we'll throw a little bit of this unbleached titanium into it. A little drip of water because it was starting to get kind of thick. And same thing, just very lightly dust that on. I'm going to leave his nose, the little muzzle part, blank because we're going to do that in a lighter color. Nice soft edges. And keep it a little bit crisper up here towards his hat. Dust that up into his ear just a little bit. And I'm going to take a hint of that down this way. And we do have a little bit of it over here. There we go. And we can take that same color down into his body. I think I'm going to cover most of his body with this color for the underpainting. But I'm going to leave his hands blank for now, just so I can remember where they are, and I'm going to do them different anyway. Crisp edge around the ornament here. And as I paint the ornament in later, I can reshape it, so it's not a huge deal. But I think it's a little easier if you generally try and keep it pretty much the right shape in the first place. You can fix it later, but if you don't have to, then that's even better. All right, let's fill in the lighter area of his fur, and I'm gonna go down to my number 3 round. But whatever you're comfortable with, I'm gonna take this same general color right here, but I'm gonna pull a ton of unbleached into it. So it's mostly unbleached titanium. It's just got a hint of those other colors in there. And I'm just gonna generally start kind of sketching in where this color is gonna go. Don't worry about details, you know, getting your little furry ends. Just make sure you're not creating hard lines between any of these colors. I know you can still see that pencil a little bit through this color, but I'm not worried about it right now because I know I'm going to put a couple of layers and it'll be gone. I let that overlap that darker color a bit. And I am going to keep a nice crisp line around his nose. Now I can kind of reshape his actual nose if I didn't want it to be a perfect circle. And again, I'm going to overlap those lines a little bit. Now I'm going to take that same dark color that we used on his face here, the brown with the black, mostly on the black side, and I'm going to fill in his hands. Now you can go as realistic or as cartoony as you like with his hands. I'm going to use my number 3 round, and basically I'm going to use the tip of it to help create his hands. Now they really do kind of have fingers with little joints in them, so I'm going to use the tip of my brush like that. See that little tiny line? And then just push a little bit as I drag down. They have very long fingers. It's kind of the same way we did the hand in the ghost video that we did at Halloween. And there's going to be so much fur and stuff in here that you really just got to get a suggestion of a hand. And if you don't like it, you can cover it up or do it again or whatever you like. And see, I'm not drawing real perfect fingers or anything. I'm just really getting a suggestion of the hand on there. Whenever I want a knuckle, I just put a little bit extra pressure on my brush. Okay, all of his underpainting is done. We'll wait and we'll do his hat and the ornament later. So I'm gonna let him dry for a few minutes and then we'll come back and we'll get started on the details in his fur. All right, so our underpainting is dry. We can go ahead and get started on our details. So I'm pretty much gonna stick with my number 3 round, but whatever you're most comfortable with is fine. Let's start in this middle area, the mid-tone area. So I wet down my brush and I'm gonna pick up some of this unbleached titanium. It's pretty much just unbleached titanium. Actually, you know what? I think I'm gonna go back to this darker color because I don't feel like it comes up high enough here. So a little bit of my brown, a little bit of black, and we'll just generally get that middle color again. A little bit of water. And I'm going to come in here, let me get this at an angle that you can see. And I'm putting my hand down and I'm just going to use the tip of the brush and just kind of flick it out like that. Now if you're doing it like this and your brush strokes are too fat, then just check the pressure that you're putting on it. You're probably just putting a little bit too much pressure on your brush. And see, it's just the tips of my fingers that are moving. It's not my whole hand. So my hand is planted firmly on the table, and I'm just flicking with the tips of my fingers. And that's better. The color's a little transparent there, but that's okay. Now I just picked up the Unbleached Titanium, kept my brush rolled to a little point, and we're gonna add in some highlights wherever we feel like they should be. So this is a mid-tone area. There are little bits of dark like we have here and light like we have here. So that's what we're gonna do now. I'm gonna kind of start down here. And again, I'm just using small brush strokes, kind of flicking upward in the direction that his hair grows. And now, if I do have lines that are a little bit too hard between my colors, I can kind of break that up a little bit. See how I just softened that just by taking my brush stroke right over the transition of the two colors. And a little bit right here. Get a little extra water so that my brush strokes are nice and crisp. But if they're a little bit fuzzy, that kind of helps with the hair look too. Get some going on up here. And for sure right here in front of his ear. Now I know that this color looks really disconnected from the rest of his coloring, his hair, but it won't, I promise. So don't worry about that right now. Let's break this up a little bit. So I'm starting in the Unbleached Titanium that I laid down before and then flicking out into the brown color. So starting there and flicking out. If you get too much of this color somewhere, don't worry about that. Because remember, doing fur is all about layers. I'd rather have you have a little bit too much of this color right now than not enough of it, because when we go back and do the next colors, we are gonna take a little bit of this away. Don't worry about overlapping his hat. And we'll get just a little bit of that going on over here. Now he also has some of this color around his eyes, just a little bit. So with very, very light pressure, I'm gonna do some very small little streaks of color, all kind of following the direction that I want his hair to be growing. We can break up this line too. Don't worry about his body right now. I know he looks ridiculous right now. He looks like a weird bear. But he won't look like a weird bear. And he has this color around his ear too, around the edge of his ear. So I'm using the same brush stroke and I'm going outside of it into the green background, but I'm also going to bring it inside into his ear a bit. Let's get a bit of that dark color. So I'm going to pick up a bit of brown and mix it in with my black. I'm going to mostly lean toward black. I want this to be quite dark. A little extra water. Roll my brush so that I get a nice sharp point. And let's start in the dark part of his face. So I really just want a suggestion of this light color in here. So I'm going to take this dark color and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm not trying to cover up the white. It's going to cover it up a bit. And this is ever so slightly darker than that first color that I laid down. See how now we're starting to get a little bit of a furry look. Keep in mind the direction of your brush strokes. Fill in those little white spots of the canvas there. And don't be afraid to flick it outside over your background. Quite a bit of my background showing here. Or my canvas. Okay, I'll let that dry on that side for a minute and we can come back and change it if we need to. Let's do the other side. All right, I'm gonna let that side dry as well, and we'll come back to it later if we need to. In the meantime, let's take the same dark color, their brush rolled to a nice crisp point, and we're gonna add a little bit of it throughout here. So I'm gonna start right here by his nose because I feel like I brought that light color down too far toward his nose. Okay, so I'm gonna come right here from the edge of his nose, very small brush strokes. In the same direction that all of his hair is growing. So I'm kind of going from his nose up. Still kind of breaking up that line, so I let a little bit of it flick into that lighter area. And again, don't worry about his hat. If it goes over the edge of his hat a little bit, that's okay. And for sure overlap that lighter color. Remember that lighter color was kind of looking like it was floating or something and looked kind of strange on its own. But with that little bit of the darker color overlapping it, it kind of starts pulling it down into the hair. Makes it look a little more natural. But now I know the black kind of looks weird, almost like it's floating. But we are gonna fix that. And I still feel like there's just a little too much of that light color in here. So I'm just running a bit more, at least through the edges. It's okay if we have some of that toward his eye, but I feel like out this way, I want it to be a little bit darker. But all raccoons look different. I discovered when I was looking at images online that, you know, some raccoons are almost just gray. Some of them have the very standard kind of bandit look like we're doing here, and some of them really don't. So if your raccoon looks a little different from mine, I think that that's okay. Let's get just a tiny bit more right here, kind of flicking off the edge of his head. And we'll start working some of that here. I'm flicking over the edge of the lighter color in his ear. Covering up those little bits of my canvas right there. So if you have a hard time with brush pressure, I know we talk about this all the time, I don't want you to use this painting as a practice for the brush pressure because you're going to get frustrated. So if you have a hard time getting the little lines like that, then I want you to just get a junk canvas and over and over and over practice brush pressure. Try different brushes. Try holding your hand a little bit different. Try all kinds of things so that you can master that brush pressure. And what works for me might not work for you. You might end up doing it totally different. That's not the point. The point is that you figure out what works for you so that you can accomplish the things that you want to accomplish. All right, now we're going to go back to that mid-tone color. So I'm going to grab a bit of black, bring it over to here, mix in with my brown, and some unbleached. You want a color that's pretty close to the base color that you did. And I think that's pretty close. A little drip of water, because these heavy bodies, they make it a little bit tougher to get super crisp little detailed lines. So if you're using basics, you might have an easier time getting really crisp lines. And again, that's another reason I'm not using matte medium today, because the matte medium doesn't really thin down the paint enough to help get those super crisp lines. So again, I'm going to start down here on his nose. This is the mid-tone color, remember, the color I started with. And I'm going to come right to where his nose is going to be. Same thing, just flicking over. I'm not painting over everything. I'm going to let some of that, of the light color and the dark color, all of it show. And again, breaking up those lines a little bit. If there's anywhere that I feel like has too much color, then I can just make sure to take this color over top of it and it'll blend it back because, again, this color matches the underpainting. And because this color matches the underpainting, I don't have to worry quite so much about getting nice, crisp little lines. If they're a little fatter or fuzzier, that's okay. See how we kind of kicked that back just a little bit? And let's do a little through here. Not a lot though. I kind of like the way this is looking. I just want to bring a bit of a cohesion to everything. So I'm going to take just a tiny bit of this in there. Let it overlap my white a bit. And I do think I want some of that white a little bit lighter, but I'll worry about that when I start highlighting the area around his eyes. Fill in some of those spots where my canvas is still showing. See, look, I even brought that into the lighter area. There, I like the way that he's starting to look. Now we're going to work on the lighter area in his face. And this, I think, is where it's gonna kind of start pulling it all together. I'm gonna grab a good amount of my Unbleached and I'm gonna mix it in with some white. We're gonna start going a little bit lighter, but I don't wanna just jump straight to white. I'm gonna mix them about 50-50, so it's still on the warm side from the Unbleached. That's pretty good. A little extra water to thin it down a bit. All right, I'm gonna pretty much fill in this area, especially where I've got other colors or pencil showing. But if a little bit of this first layer still shows through, that's perfectly okay. That's why we did it. Keep a crisp line around the edge of his nose. And for sure, just gently break up this line a little bit. See how I'm coming outside of it? And right here, we'll break it up into this darker color. I'm almost gonna bring it right up into his eye, but it's just kind of a suggestion of it. I'm not drawing a hard line up there or anything. And same thing in his eyebrows. Keep that line broken up, little tiny bits of hair coming out. And we can pretty much fill in the inside. Again, don't worry too much about the shape of his eye, his actual eyeball. So I never want you to freak out that something didn't work out when you're doing this. You know, if you get too much of one color somewhere or whatever, just let it dry. You can come back and fix it. But remember, you really want to just kind of put it down and leave it alone. The more you try and work a certain spot, the more you're gonna start overworking it, and then you're really gonna have a hard time with it. See, now that we've got this lighter color in here, I feel like he's starting to come together. Just covering up those spots where I got my color a little bit too low. And I feel like I wanna break it up just a little bit more right here around his nose. Super light pressure, very, very soft brush stroke lines. That was a little bit more aggressive than I wanted, but that's okay. Let's go straight into white. I didn't clean off my brush, so I still have the unbleached and white mixture on my brush, but I'm just mixing that straight into some white to get a much lighter color. Little extra water. Roll that brush to a nice crisp point. And let's go even a little bit lighter. This color is going to be a bit more noticeable on here than that last color. Still taking it outside our shape just a little bit. And see how I had the hair kind of growing up here, and then as it comes around, it comes down this way. So it's almost like a spiral. So don't do like, you know, sun rays. kind of comes up and they come back down around this way. Crisp line around his nose. And see, I didn't try and cover all of that first layer, so we can still see it. There's a little bit more depth there. And the other side. So for a long time, I told you guys, well, I told some people when they would ask directly about me doing an animal painting or, you know, teaching you how to do fur, I kind of said no, because it just wasn't something that, I think it wasn't something I was confident with, you know, I can be honest about that, but also it wasn't something I felt like I was seriously interested in. I didn't feel like I wanted to paint animals, but I had this idea for this cute little raccoon, and I was like, well, gosh, I guess that means I have to paint fur then. And so I did it. And I discovered, because honestly, this is one of the first times I've ever just like painted full-on fur. And I discovered that, you know, painting fur is really like painting anything else. It's just brush strokes. It's just layering. That's all it is. So if you painted, let's see, remember the one where I did the chair with the textured wall? So if you painted that with me, then you can paint animal fur. Totally different images, I know, but the concept is really the same. And I think that that's the case a lot of times in painting. I'm just going to take a bit of this light color out into his face here, just a hint of it. See, now he's starting to look like a furry little raccoon. Actually, he kind of looks like a beaver right now because those look like big beaver teeth. But he won't look like a beaver. But you could paint a beaver with a little Christmas hat on. That would be super cute. And if you were going to paint a beaver, you would do it the exact same way we're doing our raccoon. You would draw it the exact same way. I don't mean that the beaver and the raccoon look exactly the same, but I mean, you know, how we broke the raccoon down into a few very simple lines and shapes and put those together, and that creates a raccoon. The beaver is really the same thing, or any other animal, it's going to be the same thing. You just want to break it down into those basic lines and shapes. And then you just layer it. You know, look at a spot and decide, you know, this area is lighter than this area, and this area is lighter than this area, and just underpaint them like that. That's how you start. And you can make it up as you go. All right, let's get some of this light color up here in his ear as well, especially around the edge. So just kind of right in there, flick it outside, give him some nice furry ears. And I probably shouldn't have done the dark little flicky edges, but that's okay. Because I'm going to cover up a lot of them right now, but I can come back and add them in. So if you lose a layer you've already done, don't sweat it. Let's just bring a bit of that right into here. And you know what? I do actually want to bring a bit more of this light color into his face. I added a little bit in his nose, but I want to add some up in here too. So remember, this isn't quite pure white. There's still just the tiniest hint of the unbleached titanium in there. So particularly right up here by his ear, very light pressure, just some teeny tiny little brush stroke lines. I cleaned off my brush and now I'm just gonna pick up titanium white. Pure titanium white, no unbleached in there at all. And we're just gonna amp up the highlights again. I'm gonna put you into time lapse for this because it's the exact same thing. Okay, now before we judge how all of his hair and everything looks, let's fill in his eyes and his nose. So I'm still using my number 3 round and I'm just getting black. And I'm just gonna fill these shapes in. Whoops, paintbrush down. Just take a damp brush and you can clean it up pretty easy. And now that his eyes and his nose are filled in, I feel like we can see a little bit better what he actually looks like, and then kind of gauge where we want to make adjustments to the fur in his face. And I can tell you right now that I want to bring a little bit more of this dark color up around his eyes and maybe pull it into this lighter color a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I'm really just doing the exact same thing that I did in the first place, as far as, you know, when I did the little brush stroke lines. So I'm really just going to put you into time lapse for this part while I work on that. Much better. I like the shape of the fur around his eyes much better. I'm going to take my dark color and just work on the little hairy bits inside of his ear here, just taking some of that along the edge of that white that looked a little bit strange. Okay, I think his face is done for now. We need to add some details to his eyes and his nose, but overall I'm pretty happy with how he looks. Let's move on to his body. So I'm still going to use my number 3 round, and I want to start right up here around his neck. I'm going to get some dark shadow color going on in there. And that's going to be my black-brown mixture. Again, maybe just a little heavier on the side of the black. So what I'm going to do is take this dark color around under his face here, and everything is going to kind of move out to the side this way. Then when I get to his hands, I'm going to change the direction of his fur right here. And that's going to kind of make it look like his hands are attached to some arms that are coming up. So I've got my dark color, and I'm just going to do his little hair details. And again, don't be afraid to take it outside of that color into the background. And I don't have to be quite as delicate here as I was on his face, because this is his body, so his hair might be a little bit longer or a little bit more wild. And this area I didn't fill in at all, so I'm going to make sure I get that area nice and solid. And it's okay if his face kind of blends in with his body here. I want it nice and dark right here. And I didn't go around my ornament all the way. Now his hand, I'm not terribly worried about. So if you have to go over his hand a little bit, that's fine. We're gonna add some highlights and stuff on there. So don't sweat if you cover up his hand a little bit. In fact, when I get to the ornament, I'm probably gonna end up covering up quite a bit of his hand. But I wanted to make sure that I got his hand in there before I did this part, so I knew where it was gonna be and where to make my fur change direction. And I'm going to get some of that dark color right here under the ornament. I feel like there'd be quite a bit of shadow here. Kind of using my brush on the flat, like dry brushing, kind of like we've done grass in the past. And see how I left his arms blank right there. Let's take that same color and we're gonna go up toward his hands here. Overlap that color that we put on his hands. And make sure we get all of those little canvas bits filled in. I probably should have paid a little bit better attention to that, but that's all right. I'm not worried about it. The one thing I've noticed about heavy body that I don't like as much as with the basics is, man, it dries so fast. I mean, it dries fast on my canvas, but I have to struggle to keep a small amount of paint from drying on my palette a lot more than I do with basics. All right, let's take that same mixture and we'll mix a bit of unbleached titanium into it. Just get a little bit of a lighter color. And here I'm going to start this color on his arms right below his hands, because if I make the rest of his body a little darker and this part of his arm a little bit lighter, that's also going to pull that toward us a little. So I've got this lighter color and I'm going to start here and make sure that I overlap his hand a little bit. This is pretty much the same color as the underpainting. Can you see how I made these little lines here? They don't go this way, they don't go this way, they kind of go between the two. Just to say that's where his arm kind of bends a little bit. I'm going to take just a hint of this color up through here. Not a lot of it. And you probably can't see a big difference in these colors right now, but I think that that's okay. You will. Okay, let's go lighter. I'm just mixing right into my unbleached titanium. A little extra water. And again, I'm going to start just below his hands. Very small brush strokes, but quite a few of them. Just really dry brushing that color on. And I don't feel like there's enough contrast between his arms in here, so I'm gonna go even darker back in here. Got a little bit of fresh burnt umber and some black, quite dark, mostly black. And wherever I really wanna say that his arm is different from his body, that's where I'm gonna put this color. But I am using my brush, see, kind of flat. I'm not worrying about trying to make the crisp little lines here. Just almost dry brushing it here. And this canvas has quite a bit of tooth, so it's really giving me some texture, which is good. And see, now it's darker there and lighter there, so that kind of makes his arms different from his body. Exactly what I want. And I think I'm gonna do a little bit of that right up in here. And you'll be able to tell a difference really once we get some highlight on his hand, but I'm gonna do that last. And lighter, let's go back to our unbleached white mixture. Oh, I didn't clean off my brush real well. That's all right. Got a little bit of that brown and black mixing in there. And we'll get some nice teeny, now I am trying to do some crisp little lines in here. Get it outside of that line a bit. Remember, he's furry, he doesn't have hard lines. So now hopefully you see why I didn't do this on a 12 by 16. This video on a 5 by 7 is long enough as it is. Okay, I think that's looking pretty good. I'm just gonna go back to this mid-tone color again for just a minute. Just so our light color doesn't look like it's floating. Very, very light pressure, just getting almost like little scratches of this color. I don't want to cover up that white. I just want to overlap it a little bit with a mid-tone color because that kind of pulls it into everything else. Let's take a hint of that mid-tone color into here because I don't want this area to be just all dark, particularly at the bottom here. I'm just going to scratch some of this mid-tone color in underneath the ornament, directly underneath it. I think I'll leave that nice and dark. And just a hint more of it up in here. I feel like his body is pretty well done. I might make some adjustments later as we go, but as of right now, I kind of feel like I like the way his body looks. All right, I cleaned off my brush. Let's get some white and we'll add some details to his eyes and his nose. So I'm just gonna start with white. And I'm not gonna draw a hard circle around the entire edge of his eye, really just in some spots. So notice in a couple places here, I almost left a little bit of the canvas showing. So I'm pretty much gonna follow that, little tiny brush strokes again. Another thing you can do is, if you haven't filled in his eyes yet, if you're pretty happy with the size and shape that you already have set aside for his eyes, just don't fill it in all the way. You could just leave part of the canvas showing there. Whatever you're the most comfortable with. Oh, I think he has one eye bigger than the other. Let's fix that. I feel like this eye is a little bit bigger. So I'm just gonna pull this eye out a little bit farther. That's good. We'll work on his nose for a minute. So I'm gonna take a hint of black into my unbleached. Maybe I'll add a little bit of brown to it too to warm it up a bit. It's a lighter color, but it's not like incredibly light. It's not really close to white or unbleached. It's just kind of a neutral grayish brown. And we'll give him a little bit of a highlight right on the tip of his nose and maybe coming up one side. He's got his little nostrils, so I'll just kind of draw a line that comes down. I know that looks awful. Don't sweat it. Let's get a little bit of black. I cleaned off my brush. And I'm just gonna wipe it over the edge. And then tap it with my finger. Kind of mushes the colors together a bit. Just very loosely, just kind of scattering that black on. Almost dry brushing it. And we'll let that sit for just a minute. Back to his eye, and we'll finish his little outline. See, it doesn't go all the way around. Just in a few little spots. And then we'll give him some eye shines. It doesn't matter what the eye shines look like. You just want to make sure that they're consistent from one eye to the next. So you wouldn't want like a dot and a line on this side and maybe a dot here and a line here. His eyes are going to look screwy. So I'm just going to come right here and put a little dot and another little dot. And right here, I'll put a dot and another little dot. Back to his nose. I just took my brush that had white on it and I just mixed it in with that color that we used on his nose in the first place. So it's a little bit lighter. My brush is pretty dry. I'm just gonna lightly touch right in there, right where I think he's gonna have the brightest shine, and a little bit on his nostril right there. And remember, if that doesn't look right, paint it over with black and do it again. But make sure you stand back to look at that. Don't judge it looking right at it from a painting distance. And what we did to his nose there is pretty much what we're gonna do to his hands, but we're gonna wait on that. Let's go ahead and paint in his hat. Now on my plate, I put out some Alizarin Crimson and some Cadmium Red Medium. You can use any reds that you like. I really like to use these two together because I think they make a really great combination. I'm gonna go back to my number 8 Bright, and I'm gonna pick up Alizarin and just start filling his hat in. I'm gonna keep a pretty sharp line right there where it meets the background, and it can be a little looser where it meets the fur part of his hat. Don't lose your line right there where the hat bends over onto itself, because we're gonna have a shadow there. Just wherever you feel like his hat might have a bit of a shadow, go ahead and put this color. And if you're not sure, you can just go ahead and paint the whole hat with this color. The Alizarin Crimson is very transparent, but the Cadmium Red Medium, especially in the heavy body line, is very opaque. So the Cadmium Red will easily cover the Alizarin. Put a little bit of a shadow right there along that edge. I think that's a good place to start. Now I'm not going to clean off my brush, I'm just going to pick up a good amount of cadmium red. See, I picked up quite a bit. And I'm going to fill in everything else. And my alizarin is still wet on my canvas, so they'll just kind of dust together nicely. And it doesn't matter where you put your shadows and highlights here, put them wherever you like. Because the alizarin is a cool red, it's got a lot of blue to it, and the cadmium is a warm red, it's got a lot of yellow to it, the alizarin is gonna naturally appear to be shadow. I'm just gonna wipe my brush off, and I'm gonna pick up more alizarin. Again, a good amount, good blob. And I'm gonna fill in this area where I know I want shadows. Nice and heavy, dust it into my cad red. I think that when you leave the little brush stroke lines like I've got going on in there, I think it almost makes his hat look velvety. So I like that. I'm gonna leave it. All right, we'll let his hat dry and we can come back and change it if we want to later. Let's do the ornament since we're already working with the red. I decided to do his ornament red, but you can do a different color if you like. Just like with this hat, I'm gonna start with the Alizarin Crimson. And again, this color is very transparent, so it's not gonna completely cover, you know, his hand or anything like that. So don't be afraid to take it over top of his hands. See, you can still see his hands. Now the cadmium red, and again, I didn't clean off my brush. And right here, I think he has a little bit of a flat spot on his ornament. And since the alizarin didn't cover it, but I know the cadmium red will, I can just come right up, take that color outside of the line of the ornament, and see that covers it up and I can reshape it. So that should tell you that you want to be careful when you get to his hands, unless you're okay just repainting his hands in. But I feel like it would be a little shadowy right there, kind of by his hands. So I'm just gonna kind of take the red, the cadmium red this way. Just about like that. Let's get a little bright spot right here. Just wipe my brush off on the paper towel and get more alizarin. Just deepen up these shadows. And I know I have a lot of white space there between his fingers, but that's okay because I left it because I didn't want to lose his fingers. So I'm gonna wait until after I've done the highlights on his hands, and then I'll just take some of that super dark color and just kind of poke it down inside those little white spots. So in the meantime, I'm gonna let everything dry because really the only thing left to do is his hands and the little furry bits on his hat. And I don't want to run the risk of grabbing any of that red when we do the fur. And I can't do anything with his hands until the red is dry. So maybe about 15 minutes. Okay, let's work on the fur on his hat. So to make the fur appear different than his light colored fur here, where this is a warm white, we're gonna make a cool white. So I'm gonna take this little bit of cobalt that I have left and grab some white, and I'm just gonna make a light blue underpainting. I don't want it to be too dark of a blue, just noticeably cooler than the white on his face. And I'm gonna fill that in. And if you lose any, I like these little bits that flip over the edge of his hat, you can go back and add those in later. Just filling it in loosely. Except right here, I do want that to be crisp because that part of his hat is on top of the fur here. And I think I want this little dangly ball to be a little bit bigger. I'm gonna go back to my number 3 round and I'm gonna pull just a little bit more blue into that mixture. And we're gonna do a very similar thing to what we did on his hair. I'm just gonna add some little flicky bits. that kind of break up the line a little bit. Add some darker color in there. I know that blue is really scary. When I was first doing this, I thought, uh-oh, maybe I don't want to do blue here. But in the end, I like the way that it came out. So don't be afraid of the blue here, because we're going to add the white back in. But this blue will shine through it, and it'll help it stay different from the white in his face. You see I'm going outside of my shape there a little. Cleaned off my brush. A little extra water. I'm going to grab some white. Just white. And same thing. Just kind of flick that white out. Don't try to cover all of the blue. And that blue is still wet, so the white is picking up and blending with it a little bit. And you can go in different directions. It doesn't have to all go in the same direction like we did on him. Oh, sorry, you couldn't see that part. Just same thing. And I'm going to pick up even more white. Let's really get that middle part light, and then just kind of break it up from there. And if your paint starts to get to the point where it's just too wet and it's just blending too much, then let it dry. I might actually let that dry for a minute before I finish it. I'm just going to finish up this part, and then I'll let that dry for a minute. Let's work on the tip of his ornament. So I'm going to keep the white that I have on my brush, and I'm going to mix it in with a little bit of black, get kind of a gray color. And you could do this in gold if you like. A little bit of extra white for a slightly lighter gray color for the top of the ornament. We're going to keep the ornament pretty simple. Let's just slash some of that across the top here for some highlight. Maybe grab a little extra black for a much darker gray. And we'll do a little low light over on this side. Somebody asked me recently, what's the difference between highlight and low light? And I guess I never explained that. So highlight is where light is reflecting. You can think of it as light, like shining, and low light is shadow. So when I say low light, I mean shadow. I just wiped my brush off, I didn't clean it. I'm gonna grab just a little bit of some more white, a little bit of a lighter color, and we'll just add a little bit of a bright spot right here at the top edge. And I think that's really all I'm gonna do to his ornament. Okay, let's take care of his hands now, because they look kind of sad. Sticking with my number 3, we're gonna get some brown black mixture. My black is about dried up. A little bit of unbleached titanium. We're going for that mid-tone color. We're as close to it as we can get. Zoom it in there a bit. And we're gonna kind of redefine where his hand is. I'm not worried about the black that I painted over with the red. Just take that down and I'm gonna kind of sketch it in so it blends in with his hair here a little bit. Maybe that zoomed in too close. There, hopefully that's better. It looked to me like it might have been a little bit blurry. I'm just kind of sketching on this color, not being real specific with it. I'm not filling in his entire hand. Just some little spots here and there. And after his hand is done, we'll go and we'll fill in those white spots. Let's even go just a little bit lighter. I'm just going to add a point of white to that mixture, so it's just a little bit lighter. And we'll do some little highlights, mostly just like on his knuckles and maybe the tips of his fingers. His hands are really just kind of suggested. Got a little more black. Get that black-brown mixture again. And we'll fill in these little spots here. And if you plan a little bit better than I did, then you won't have to worry about these little spots. And that'll be awesome. I'm just going to kind of play with the shape of his hand a little bit before we call it good. Had just a little bit too much light on his fingers, so I'm just adding a little shadow at the bottom. I feel like that's making him look just a little bit more natural. All right, let's finish up his hat, and then I think we're about done. So I'm just getting some white. I cleaned off my brush. Yep, and that's dry, so good. And I'm just kind of dry brushing this, and that blue is just kind of peeking out just a little bit. And I think right here toward where the tip of the hat flops over the fur, I'm gonna leave a little bit more of the blue showing there to kind of suggest a shadow. Nice and white there in the middle of the puffball. Oh, my puffball got out of control. That's okay. Just a little damp brush. No, everything's under control. You know what I totally forgot on our little raccoon? I forgot whiskers. Raccoons absolutely have whiskers. So I'm gonna take my long liner brush, wet it in my jar, and I'm gonna pull some white out and mix a good amount of water with it so it flows nicely. Again, you could use basics or even liquid acrylic soft bodies for this part. It might be a little bit easier than heavy bodies. And I'm just gonna start right in here and just kind of flick some little whiskers out. Now, if you're not confident in this, you can either practice on another canvas or keep a clean, damp brush available so that if you get a whisker that's kind of crazy and ugly, you can just immediately wipe it off. So I'm just gonna start in here and just start kind of flicking some whiskers out. Some are thinner, some are fatter. We'll get a couple that kind of come down this way. Just some light, small ones. And while I'm in here, I'm just going to amp up some of the white highlights in his hat. And then, for reals this time, we'll be done. I'm pretty happy with our festive little raccoon, so I think I'm going to sign him in and call him done. And there's our cute festive raccoon painting. I hope you enjoyed painting this with me, and I'm looking forward to seeing how you take some of the techniques that we worked on here and incorporate them into your own paintings as well. As always, don't forget to subscribe. We've got some fun things coming up in 2018, and I'm really excited to have you join me for those. In the meantime, if you're ready to keep painting, check out these 2 videos that I've picked just for you. Thank you as always for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.